Welcome to this quick tutorial on how to set up a Pro Tools template for mixing and mastering your acoustic guitar and vocals in Pro Tools. Having a template can really increase the efficiency and effectiveness of your workflow in your mixing and mastering and production. So it's a good idea to have one. So the first thing we want to do is create a new session, and that also is Control N, as you see. Now the first thing it's going to do is going to have a click track. I like to delete that. The next thing you want to do is create some tracks. So you can go here to track and click new, but a quick hotkey is Control-Shift-N. And I'm going to create two new mono tracks. If you have a keyboard or a stereo instrument, you would create a stereo track. And you can create these tracks real nifty like this. You can create multiple different kinds of tracks. One new stereo track, and I'll show you why in a second. We're creating these different types of tracks. And one new stereo auxiliary input. And you'll see that the stereo track has a little line in the middle, so that's how you know these are mono and this is stereo. I'm going to call this AG, acoustic guitar. How did I do that? You just double click right here and it lets you name the track and write any comments in there. Control left or right lets you name the next track over. So the next track, I'll call it vocals. And the stereo track, I'm going to call it print, and we'll see why later. And I'm going to call the auxiliary input master, the master bus. We have our tracks set up. We're ready to drag our audio in, but we won't do it just yet because we still need to set in some of our routing and plugins. Control equals, and that brings up the mix window. So this is where you get to put your plugins. I suggest you put your dynamics and EQs first, and then we'll do the reverbs after. So I like to have the console 1 on every mix channel, and if you don't know what that is, check that out. I'll throw some videos up there, and it's really a great little hardware digital software solution that lets you get really a great hands-on mixing experience and streamlines your workflow quite a bit, because you don't have to put 1,000 plugins. You can just have this one plugin and get a lot of heavy lifting done. So the next thing I'm going to do is put a second compressor on, and it's good to have more than one choice on these so that you don't have to keep setting them up. You can always X these out by holding Control and clicking, and that will just remove the plugin. Sometimes when I'm doing vocals, I'll like one compressor, and other times I'll like a different compressor. And another thing I'm going to add is delay. Now in a normal mix, you would have a separate delay input like I had for master, and I'll show you the routing to the master in a second. But in a normal mix with a lot of tracks, you would be sending multiple tracks to the delay bus and the reverb bus, and then sending that back to a mix bus. This is just a 2-track for simple acoustic guitar and vocals, or piano and vocals. You could modify it. I'm going to put the delay track right on the track itself. It just makes it simpler for me. It's less tracks to manage, and in the delay you can actually make it as dry or wet as you want, so that kind of is like sending to a bus. That's another point, is that it's nice to configure these the way you like them. I'm already dialing in settings. I'm going to set it at 10% as a standard. It's nice to have a preset to just drop it in and get used to it. For the console 1, I don't like to have preset because it's very tactile, hands-on, and every track's a little different, so it is a pretty smooth workflow. And the same for the compressors. Every track is more unique with how much compression and where to set those. But for the delay, I don't like too much delay on it, so I set it like that. Let me drag over one of these compressors, heck, why not both, to the acoustic guitar, although I probably will end up not using them, so let me X them out so that it's by default not on. Actually, let me do that to everything here. I don't use it a lot on acoustic guitar, but just in case, it's better to have it on there than not. Now, what we want to do is set up the routing. So we select both of these tracks using Shift, and then Alt-Shift, and then left-click bus, and then assign the bus to any stereo bus. I'm going to send it to a bus that I've pre-named master. You can rename right here by right-clicking on the output itself. These two tracks are going to master, but there's no input on either the stereo audio track or the stereo auxiliary input track, so we have to make an input called master. So now anything that is on these tracks is going to go out to master, and master is going to feed in to master, the track called master, which is feeding out to my audio interface into my speakers or headphones or whatever you have. That's how you set up the workflow for the signal chain. I want to also set up a print bus. So I'll make that's why I made the stereo audio track, because it's nice to print the track. You can use bounce to disk, okay? But I found that sometimes it leaves certain effects or plugins out, and it ends up wasting a lot of time. And a lot of times I make critical mix decisions on the final listen back as I'm mixing, and oh, let me stop it, tweak. Oh, let me stop it, tweak, and then I'm done. So I find the old school method of listening down to the track pretty useful in the real world application and setting. So I create this print track so that when I'm done with master, and I'll throw to videos where I've shown you how to do this on actual tracks that I've mixed before, and so you can see how it works with the audio. Here I won't show you the audio, I'm just showing you how to set up the template. So you would set the bus output, instead of to your headphone and speakers, you set the bus output to the print track. And then so now the signal chain is AG and Vox are going into the master input, and then the master output, instead of going to the speakers, is going into the print bus here, and then that's print bus is going out to the speakers. But I don't want that like that in the beginning. That's the last step, to change that setting to print, so that you then arm the print. And as I said, I show actual examples in other videos. We're not at that step. So in the beginning of the mix and mastering process, we're not ready to print the track all the way yet. So, but it's good to have that routed and have that there. The next thing we want to do is we're almost done, put our mastering effects on the bus. I like to have compression on there, and I'll put some stereo bus compression. It's nice to have some stereo widening so you can make the mix narrower or wider. Here I like to have some hard limiting so that I catch transients and peaks, and I've showed how to use all this stuff in previous tutorials. I'm gonna do one shift. Before all this, I'm gonna drop in some reverb. And as with the delay, and this is a great vintage Valhalla verb that I like to use. And so as with the delay, I'm gonna dial this down as a preset. I'll dial it down to 10%, so that every time it's not set to some crazy setting. As with the delay also, instead of sending it to a auxiliary track of its own, which would be normal in like a bigger mix with 20 or 30 or more tracks, we only have 2 or 3 tracks here. So I'm gonna put it right on the master bus. So we're gonna have some limitations with that. That means that the same amount of reverb is gonna apply to the vocals as it does to the acoustic guitar, but I think that's a good natural sound. Now, if you wanted it differently, you could create a new stereo auxiliary input, and you could put the reverb on there. And what you would do is you'd create a send, and so you could bus this to, I have a preset, a reverb send, and then you would set the input of that reverb stereo aux to be reverb. I'm doing this quick, and then you would bus the reverb auxiliary input to master. But you see how this is already getting complicated, and it's all to put one effect. And when you have 30 tracks, this makes sense, because then you can send a varying amount of reverb for you. Don't want the same amount of reverb on the snare as you do on the vocal necessarily. Probably never, right? But when you're doing a solo or duo acoustic performance and it's only like 2 to 6 instruments and it's not a huge dense mix, I think you can get away with this, and I think it's actually more effective and efficient. I'm gonna get rid of this, no send. And anytime you want to take one of these off, you just no insert. And now, of course, you don't have to have the same plugins that I do. You have your own plugins, compression and reverb and delay. Pro Tools software comes with great stock plugins. It comes with deverb. It comes with a great EQ compression chain. It comes with a great compressor here. And it comes with great EQ tools. Also, here's the EQ. You don't need to buy these fancy plugins or the Console 1, although I advise buying the Console 1. Actually, I'm going to change that one because I do prefer the 7-band visual to the Console 1 for mastering, so that I can kind of get in there with the mouse drawing these little lines like that. Next, you want to go to File, Import, Audio, or Control-Shift-I as a hotkey. You want to find that folder, so I have it here under the name of the folder. Now, audio files, and I've just got 2 tracks, and you want to add files, and done. And now you can put them in a new track. It's easier if you put it in the clip list. It ends up over on the right here. So I just put them in a new track, copy those 2 tracks over, and that's it. Now the audio's in my template. Delete those tracks. Or you could move the routing over, but I find it easier to just do it that way. Now you've got the audio here with the preset plugins, and you're ready to roll. You're ready to start tweaking dials and making your mix decisions like that. No setup required. Now you can adjust the colors too of these. So I'm gonna do that. I'm gonna make the guitar yellow, and I'll make the vocal, let's say, purple. You can see how quick it was to set up a little template. Now that only takes 5 or 10 minutes, but if you're doing that every day, every week across dozens or hundreds of tracks, that adds up to hours in the studio. Time savings. Time equals money, baby. If you like production tutorials like this, check out some more videos on the channel. Drop a comment. What's your workflow like? What kind of plugins and processing are you doing in your templates? Be sure to subscribe to the channel, ring that bell, and I'll see you soon for the next one.